Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depends where you are from. So welcome to our monthly meetup for November. For October actually. Today is the last day of October, so I messed up. But yeah, so this is a meetup from Singapore Azure community as well as the .NET developers community. So we are both two different communities but run by the same group of people. So this meetup has been starting from 2014 with Riza, and then later we have Marvin and Priyanka joining with me, Chun Lin, to be the organizers. So the reason why we have this community is to encourage the continuous learning. So we set up this group to share the knowledge of .NET, Azure, and related technologies. So throughout this, we have this meetup to encourage developers to meet with each other and make friends in this ecosystem so that we can together build a stronger, better, and bigger developer community. And at the same time, we hope that you can also help us to spread the words, try .NET and try Azure to your friends. And finally, is to enjoy the learning process. So we are here now looking for speakers. We are great that we always have speakers to join our teams to share the different kind of knowledge, starting from C#, F#, and different kind of platforms such as desktop, web, and different kind of technologies. We even have one session about IoT last year. So I hope that this gives you a rough idea on what kind of topics we are looking for. So if you are interested to be our speakers, please let us know. And of course, there's a small notice here that Riza hope that I can deliver to you is that because this is a meetup run by the developers, so normally we do not accept any kind of commercial advertisement here. But other than that, the topics related to .NET and Azure, as long as you cover all these topics, you are welcome to be our speakers. So how to sign up to be our speakers? It's quite easy. Just drop us a message on the meetup, which is over here as you can see. Then you can click contact and let us know. By the way, one of our co-organizer, Priyanka, has a message to all of us as well. So she's looking for a female speaker for .NET topics. So if you are interested, please drop Priyanka a message as well. Thank you. Okay, so yeah, due to the COVID situation, pandemic globally, so we can't meet in person as usual in Microsoft Office. So what we can do is only on YouTube, and because of that, we are able to connect with speakers from around the world. So since you are on YouTube, so please remember to guard your privacy and abide by YouTube community guidelines. And feel free to ask your question in the chat beside, so later speakers will reply them after their session. And both the video content and the live chat will be recorded, so try not to spam or do anything weird on the chat. And they will be made available on our YouTube channel after the event. So without further ado, we're going to introduce today's topic and the speaker. So we are going to talk about Microsoft Identity Platform for Developers, which will be delivered by Christos Maskas from Microsoft team. I think that's all. So Christos, I pass the time to you.
Thank you very much. Hi everyone, happy time zone. Let me share my screen so you can all see and feel what we'll be talking today. And yes, we will be talking about the Microsoft Identity Platform. Do you know when you can see my screen?
Yes, yeah, it's available now.
Perfect. Okie dokie.
I need to resize it. Yep. Christos, you can continue. Christos?
Am I muted?
Yeah, you're muted. Yes. Hi, Christos. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Ah,
I
yes.
can hear you.
Yeah, I can hear you too. Okay, you can
Okay,
continue.
cool. Right. Okay, I was a bit worried over there. Technical issues. That's the best way to start the session. So, right. We will be talking about the Microsoft Identity Platform. So if you've ever had to deal with logins, logouts, authorization, authentication, talking securely to Azure services, talking securely to other services, whatever you want to use, then this is the session for you. I will try to cover the basics. I will explain what the Microsoft Identity Platform is and what it has to offer to you, and how, as a .NET developer, you can use it to quickly implement all these things. So I work as a program manager for the Microsoft Identity Platform. I'm in the developer relationships or developer advocacy, whatever the name is these days. And I tend to be quite positive from the moment I get up until the time I go to bed. So my partner, JP, my partner in crime, always like, you're way too excited in the morning for me. So passionate about technology as well. So if you're doing stuff with anything that doesn't have to be .NET, then feel free to reach out and speak to me. One of the things that we do as part of my team is to speak to developers like you. So besides user groups and meetups and conferences, we also stream twice a week on Mondays and Fridays. We like to go on stream, usually for a couple of hours, and try to tackle one of the challenging issues in identity. Sometimes it can be as simple as showing the latest in the identity platform. Sometimes it is testing random technologies and see how they work with our platform. So the other day we did Firebase. If you ever use Firebase to develop apps, then you know that they have an authentication service. We stack Azure Identity in there, or Azure Active Directory, to see how that will work, and it was a fun experiment. So we always try to do these things. We also have community hours on Fridays. So today at 8 a.m. Pacific time, if you want to join us, we will be talking about the news of the week, what happened. Sometimes we have customer questions that we bring on the site and say, well, our customers are facing these challenges. This is how you would solve them. And if we have enough time, we also do a little bit of coding as well. So it's the 4 to 5 show on Twitch. You can use this link over here and can come and join us live. We also put everything on YouTube as well, so you can watch it on demand whenever you want. Now let's jump into the subject of identities. And let's talk about why you do not want to store or manage your users' identities. Usually when I do this session, I tend to ask, when I'm in the room with people, I tend to ask how many of you here in the room have ever tried to implement authentication? Like you roll out your own username and password database, and you have your system for hopefully multi-factor authentication, email, password reset, and what have you. And I've done it in the past as well. I would raise my hand, say, yeah, I was one of them. I remember back in 2007, I did a CMS project. And if you ever had to do it yourself, then you will realize that it is extremely challenging to get everything right. From incremental back off, if you get password sprays or brute force attacks, to making sure that the data is stored securely, and it becomes a pain. And trust me, somewhere along that process, it will become an issue. Somewhere along the process, there will be something that has not been implemented correctly, and you could end up like one of these companies out there that made the news over the past 2 years. In fact, every single week we have one of these companies making the news because they had user data compromised. If you ever saw Troy Hahn, if you know Troy Hahn, he's a security expert, predominantly in the .NET space, although he covers security across the board. He also has this website called Have I Been Pwned, which in effect takes dumps from various sites that have been breached and then publishes the information to the website. And you can go and submit your emails there in case your email has ever been found in one of these dumps. and has been compromised. So for people that tend to use passwords, then that's a very good way to identify whether their account has been compromised somewhere else and then started being used by someone else somewhere else. As you can see here, the number is quite scary. We have 10 billion accounts owned by security breaches around the world. And you can see that the companies that are put in the background, they're all different things, from making pizzas to storing files in your Dropbox to creating stuff with Adobe. So it's not that the fact that you might say, well, we're a small company, we're not doing anything exciting, we don't have lots of user data. Once you put stuff in the public domain, then it becomes a target. Whether you like it or not, anything that is running with a public-facing IP or a public-facing API or endpoint, it will be scanned for any vulnerabilities. And we don't want you to be there. We don't want you to be one of these people that make the news. In fact, we want you to make the news for good reasons, like having a successful business, never for having your users' data compromised. So when it comes to implementing authentication and authorization, hopefully you have heard about delegated authentication. This is the idea of you delegating that process to someone else. Microsoft Identity, the Microsoft Identity platform is one of these services that allows you to offload the username and password management, the authentication, the resets, the two-factor authentication, the conditional access to a different service. So you can focus on your problems, which is creating a website or creating a mobile app and making it nice and functional. You don't want to spend 3 weeks or 3 months trying to implement your own authentication. And why do you not want to do that? Because as you can see, Azure Active Directory is dealing with 30 billion authentications per day. That's an insane amount of number. Now, you might not have 30 billion authentications per day. You might not have even 1,000 authentications. It doesn't matter. We will scale with your platform. So whether you have 1 user or whether you have 1,000 users per second, this platform is designed to scale with your application. And as you can see, an insane amount of companies out there is using Azure Active Directory for authenticating their users and managing their users securely. We have 1,500 engineers working day in, day out to make sure that what you do is the minimal amount of code, and you can quickly implement identity. You get a whole number of features out of the box for you for free without having to implement any additional code, and then you can move on and do something else. And today we will see how in the .NET space this becomes a reality. Now, as a developer, there are usually questions that you have to ask yourself when it comes to implementing such a thing. So if your manager comes over and says, hey, John, I want you to go and create this new website and we want some users to be able to sign in and sign out, then one of the first questions you have to ask is, do we have something as a company that we can quickly leverage in implementing that? So for most companies out there, whether they know it or not, there is an Azure AD tenant somewhere sitting. So if you are using M365, if you are using Office 365 in your company, you already have an Azure AD tenant sitting behind the scenes. If you are an Azure developer, if you are working with Azure, you also have an Azure AD out there for free as well. So these are all available to you, and they can implement. They can be added to your solutions. How easy it is to build authentication in my applications? Hopefully, after this session today, you'll realize that it only takes a couple of lines of code to integrate that with your ASP.NET Core apps. Does it support or integrate well with the rest of the platform language and tools? Absolutely. Now, it doesn't have to be the Azure platform, it doesn't have to be .NET, but since this is an Azure and .NET user group, we'll focus on that. And that's probably the happiest path you can get inside the Microsoft platform. From a developer perspective, you get all the benefits of developing locally, testing locally, and running locally against Azure securely. Then you can take the same code, push it to QA, test, or production without any code changes and still benefit from things like Azure Managed Identity. You also have the tight integration with things like CI/CD via GitHub Actions or Azure DevOps. And finally, you have the Azure AD or BTC sitting behind the scenes securing your users. So from platform perspective, it's the best. From a language perspective, it's first party, obviously a lot better. And then from tooling perspective, Visual Studio Code do allow you to have this kind of super tight integration. Does it support advanced security capabilities out of the box? Yes. You don't have to build multi-factor authentication. You don't have to implement conditional access. You don't have to do incremental consent yourselves. Everything is inside the libraries, and everything is inside the platform. So from a developer perspective, there's very little work that you need to do to benefit from the identity platform, not to mention the security benefits that you get at the back of that. So when it comes to implementing the solution, obviously we give you reduced sign-in friction. So from a user perspective, you come into the app, you click on the sign-in, you get redirected to a page where you have to put your username and password, your credentials. If it's single sign-on, then that's even better if you're running a line of business apps against Azure AD. And that's it. You can go from a single user to 10,000 users per second and scale instantly without having to worry about how that's going to work. Whereas if you have your own username and password database, you can see how this can become a major issue as your application scales up. Access to organizational data. If you haven't worked with Microsoft Graph before, and I will do a quick tour about Graph later on, but Graph also allows you to surface a lot of information from your organization to your app, to your users. So you can create a lot more interactive and a lot more interesting sessions for your users. Graph also allows you to automate quite a few things. So it's not just the end user, but it's also for you as a developer, for you as an IT person, to be able to go and quickly automate certain things. Complying with IT, that's very important, especially with, we saw that with COVID, as people went into lockdown and started working remotely, many companies got into the point that they had to control access to their data. They had to control access to their apps. And for those of you out there that have been using Azure AD for some time, you know that this is fairly straightforward to implement using conditional access. It's also straightforward for IT teams to see where people are logging in from and login patterns and what have you. So it can quickly help organizations and IT teams to safeguard against insecure access or any brute force attacks that may be happening on the network. So you get all that. As a developer, you don't really have to care about these things, right? Because you implement the authentication and someone else behind the scenes looks after the security of the infrastructure. And finally, safeguarding access. We did talk about all these companies getting hacked. Azure AD has an insane amount of security and processes to make sure that once you implement your application and once you provide proper authorization, that's the responsibility of the developer, then the user's data is sitting where it's supposed to be, and they should only have access to the things that have been authorized via API permissions or through your authorization logic within the application. And we will see how, for example, if you're creating an API, you can quickly check the token claims to make sure that the incoming calls have access to the things that they're supposed to have. And if they don't have, they get back a 403 and they have to go and fix it. So there's some exciting stuff out there. So when it comes to getting started with the Microsoft Identity Platform, there are two different components. One is the app registration. You have to go into Azure AD or a B2C and say, I want to work with you. I will have an application, whether it's a mobile app, a web app, a desktop app, a daemon. We have some questions. I'll be answering questions in a second. So when you want to have an app that authenticates against Azure AD, you have to go and create an app registration, as it's called, inside the Azure AD portal. That app registration shows your intent. You say, I'm going to have a web app or a desktop app or a daemon or anything that is going to communicate with Azure AD. Inside this registration, you say what kind of permissions you want to give to your app and your users. You define certain scopes and some redirect URIs. We will see them in a bit. And once you do that, then that's the Azure AD component done. You're finished with Azure AD, and all you have to do now is go and implement your code. Now, in terms of code, we give you two options. One is the MSAL library. That's the Microsoft Authentication library. So if you're going file new project and you need to add authentication, then that's the best solution, because MSAL is first party and it's optimized to work around the Azure AD. However, because Azure AD and B2C are OpenID Connect certified endpoints, any library that you already have that uses this protocol, OpenID Connect, can also work with our endpoint. So if you already have an existing app that you've been using for the last 2 years that uses OpenID Connect, then that means that you don't have to yank it out, you don't have to strip out your code to bring the new code in. You can just point your OpenID Connect configuration to Azure AD or B2C and start working out of the box. So either MSAL or bring your own library. We don't really mind about that as long as you're compliant. There's one thing I want to highlight here, and many of you may already have heard about ADAL, the older library that we had to use for authenticating against Azure AD. Now, ADAL is being sunsetted as of June 2022. So if you have applications right now that are using ADAL for authenticating against our endpoints, then you need to start working on migrating those apps to MSAL. The migration can be different depending on which framework, which version of .NET you're on, and it can be as simple as stripping out 20 lines of code and replacing it with one, or it could be a little bit more involved if you're on older versions of the framework, like full framework or .NET Core 2.0 or what have you. So we've done a couple of streams on our 45 show showing how to migrate from ADAL to MSAL. That video is also on YouTube. So if you want to have a look on how involved it is to do today, then make sure you have a look. But I would urge you to start looking in your enterprises, in your apps, to migrate, because it will not be supported after June 2022. So you have a little bit of time, but it's nice to plan in advance. Now, sometimes you might want to call some API. So once your application authenticates, once your users are into your app, you might be calling something like Azure Storage, or you could be calling Microsoft Graph or one of your own APIs. If that's the case, then inside Azure AD, you need to do a little bit more configuration. You need to add this information so to be able to acquire the access tokens to go and speak to these services. And that's again a simple part of the process. When it comes to the supported identities, we talk about, I've already mentioned B2C, but I want to expand a little bit on this one now. So when it comes to writing code, and once it comes to implementing identity and authentication, there are two different components or two different decision trees there. One, as you come at the top and you say, I want to add logins, perfect. If you are creating a line of business app for work or school accounts, then Azure AD is your choice. Azure Active Directory is where you have to go, because this is where all the organizational accounts are sitting in. You also have the option to add Microsoft accounts there as well. Although I'd like not to confuse these two things, because if you are creating a line of business app, you want to keep it as a line of business app. Then if you're creating a website for yourself, if you are creating a mobile app for your cousin or a forum for a friend, and they need to be able to log in their users. If you are Walmart or Coca-Cola, or if your company needs to deal with customers outside the organization, like, I have a clothing company and I want my customers to come in and buy securely their clothes, their garments, then in that instance, I will be using the business to consumer version. So Azure AD B2C, business to consumer, business to customer, is the option where customers come in, they create their own accounts with their own emails and passwords, or they can bring their social media accounts into your tenant, and then they can log in, manage their account using those external identities. So for line of business apps, for work and school accounts, you have Azure AD. For consumer or for anything that doesn't have organizations behind them, it's a business to consumer. So you can see we have a full gamut of versions. Then there are other things in there like business to business and a little bit more complex scenarios, but I don't want to expand on them unless there's a specific question. So username and password databases, perfect, B2C. If you want a more advanced organizational solution, then Azure AD. And the nice thing about these two flavors of identity is that they're built on top of industry standards. So we're not locking you into proprietary protocols or proprietary solutions. If you're using OAuth 2 or if you're using OpenID Connect and SAML, then all these things are supported in the Microsoft Identity Platform. We have a question from Alicia here. Hi, Christos, using Azure AD, but message stops users with personal accounts to log in my app. Not sure how to proceed other than editing its manifest. Due to temporary differences in supported functionality, we don't recommend enabling personal Microsoft accounts for an existing registration. I think you may have to recreate the app registration for that and enable Microsoft accounts. I don't think you can go back and retrospectively fit the Microsoft accounts. So when you create the solution, I think you get the choice to go single tenant, multi-tenant, and single tenant with MSA accounts. And I think once you create them, you can't go back. If that's not the case, then reach out to me. I will put the email for our team at the end. And we also have a support team for developers, dedicated to developers, and they can also help you out. So we'll definitely get at the bottom of that, Alice. Right. So let's get into some demos. I like me some demos. And before I get started, let me just bring the browser up and talk about the Microsoft Identity.web library. Anyone here heard of Microsoft Identity.web at all? Feel free to leave it on chat or let me know. But we GA'd this new library back in September 2020. So it's a very new solution. And it's the new way of enabling ASP.NET Core applications to authenticate and speak against Azure AD or B2C. The code is currently on GitHub. There's a NuGet package that you can download. And it has significantly simplified the way that we interact with Azure AD. In the past, if you've ever done file new project and add authentication, you will still get an Azure AD element in there. You could select Azure AD. You could create an app registration. But that process inside ASP.NET Core was using, or ASP.NET, was using the ASP.NET identity system. So it allows you to log into ASP.NET Core. It allows you to log into Azure AD or B2C. But if you were to do anything else with the Microsoft platform, then you had to go and download an extra package called MSAL, which we talked about it. And then you had to re-authenticate with MSAL and then be able to call APIs or tokens or whatever. So there was a distinct difference between sign-in and token acquisition. So you had to do two different processes there. You had to download extra libraries. And it always became confusing for developers to work with that. So what we did is we created this Microsoft Identity.web that wraps around this whole identity system, and it's built on top of MSAL. So when it comes to building new apps, you only have to use them once. You only have to download one NuGet package that will do all the nice things for you. So let's go and see this in action. If we come here, and I will create a new folder. I'll name it Sync Demo. And we'll CD into that. And in here, I'm going to create a new web app, a new ASP.NET Core 3.1 web app using the new Microsoft Identity.web. So I will do .NET new web app 2, and I will explain why it's 2, and then --auth single.org. This is going to go and spin up the website for me. It will also add authentication for me. We'll download the necessary NuGet packages. So let's go and see it in action. I will open this in code, Visual Studio Code, and let's hide that. Let's navigate through the code a little bit, and then we'll run it and see how this works in action. The first thing that we want to see is the app settings. This is our Azure AD configuration up here. Obviously, you see right now, it's pointing to some placeholders. It doesn't have the right information. We will change this to make it work. I don't want this. Then inside our project, we have the necessary NuGet packages. You'll see we're going to have two NuGet packages here. One is Microsoft Authenticate.web, and the other one is the web.ui. The UI is the one that brings the sign-in, sign-out information, or the sign-in, sign-out views in your app, which are embedded inside the DLL. So when people go /login, they are redirected to the right space. And in the startup, this is where all the magic happens. This is where we wire up our authentication. In line 32 and 33, this is the space, or this is the location where we add our authentication. You notice that down here we have add Microsoft Identity web app. This is what says to our startup. This is what says in our middleware how to authenticate users. And in this instance, we're using Azure AD. In fact, we could remove that configuration get section and just put configuration there. It will still work out of the box. But if you have a custom section, then that's where you can pass a specific name. Down here, we're calling the Microsoft Identity UI. So we say every time somebody has to log in as part of the Azure pages, also go and bootstrap the UI for that. So far 3 lines of code, right? You're with me? And then down here, we have use authentication. So that's the last component that we need to add to make it work. Now let's go and let's set it up so it works. Portal.azure.com. So right here now, we're going to create an app registration on my test tenant, and we will use that information to authenticate. So Azure Active Directory, and in here we're going to create a new app registration. We'll give it a nice name. We'll call it Singapore Demo. We'll only use accounts in this organizational directory. Remember, this is the first part. We said we need to create an app registration. This is what we're doing right here. The only other bit I have to do here is to add an authentication platform. This is what says to my app registration what kind of app I have working with this platform, right? So from this perspective, we're going to have an ASP.NET Core app. So down here, we select .NET. Now, very quickly, we know that the local host is HTTP, localhost, and then it's 5000 because we're running on the default port for Kestrel. And I will select ID token and configure. We also need to add the HTTPS because I think when we're running locally, sometimes it redirects to HTTPS by default. So localhost 5001. And I know. Down here, there's one more thing I need to do. So if we come back here and I come to my settings, I need to grab that. If we miss that, it will say I can't find the redirect URI. It's misconfigured. So let's add that there, and let's add that there. And I will save this. Now, how would this work in a modern app example, .NET Angular? Yeah, so for .NET Angular, you would have 2 app registrations, most likely. I assume that the Angular is doing the single page app front end, and then your .NET is the API that serves everything. So in this instance, you would have one app registration for the Angular, and you'll be using either MSAL browser or MSAL Angular. We have an Angular wrapper that in effect uses MSAL JS 2.0 and wraps around Angular, so you have the nice Angular components to implement the authentication in the front end. So the user would authenticate using the Angular app against Azure AD, and then they would also acquire the appropriate tokens to go and speak to your .NET API. So the second app registration would be for your .NET API, where you would have specific permissions. In effect, you would expose that API from here and say, my .NET is an API that expects a specific claim. And then when the single page app, your Angular app, signs in the user, it also prompts for an access token for your API. So that's how it would work. And there are also quite a few examples out there that show you how to do it. Again, you can still use the Microsoft Identity.web that I'm showing right now. So we save that, we have the information now. Let's go and add the missing configuration settings. So we need the app registration, so the app ID, sorry. So if we come down here, we need to change that inside my client ID or app ID here. Then we need to grab the tenant ID, which is down here. So our tenant goes here. Very nice. And then inside my qualified domain name, I'll use my custom domain name .microsoft.com. That's it. Let's save this one and run it and see what happens. .NET build. And then very quickly we'll do .NET run and navigate to the page, and all the magic will be there. So .NET run. Will it work? Let's go. 5,000 and see what happens. Localhost. There you go. So as soon as I come to my app, it expects me to log in because that's how we set it up, or that's how it's set up via the Bootstrap or the template, the default template. You can also opt in to say, you know, the login page, sorry, the index page, the home page can be for anyone, anonymous. But when they have to access a different part of the website, then they have to authenticate. So you don't have to do this authentication up front. It's just how it's configured by default. Now I will select my my right account, and it asks me to sign in. Here it prompts me for consent. It says your app, this app, is asking to access some certain information inside Azure AD for your account. Are you consenting to that? I am consenting for my basic information. This is very similar to mobile apps asking permission to your profile and pictures and what have you. You can also do the same here. I will accept this one, and lo and behold, I'm signed in. So 4 lines of code to implement this this thing end to end. This is all it took. So Microsoft Identity.web makes it super easy. It acquires my tokens, it stores, it caches them, and then it comes back to do everything. Let's do an API with Microsoft Identity.web, because if you've ever had to deal with APIs, then you know that it's a lot more involved when it comes to grabbing the incoming tokens, validating the tokens that they come from the right place, from the right accounts, and then also once you go inside the controllers, you need to validate that the tokens have the right claims. So the middleware is a lot more involved, and I will show you what I mean when we compare the before and after. So let's go cd out of this one. Let's make a new directory. So in here, we're going to create an API, .NET new web API 2, and then --auth. Now here you can say single org, multi-tenant, or you can also choose B2C. It will work the exact same way, so it doesn't have to be Azure AD. Let's go single org. This library, in effect, works in exactly the same way for Azure AD and B2C. So let's go and have a look into our API code. Maximizing this one, not this one, wrong window. Let's maximize this one, close it down. Very similar setup, so app settings, expect to have the Azure AD configuration. Our code, or sorry, our dependencies now are less. So if I go into my project, you notice that I am missing the UI element. I don't need to have a UI element because there's no user interaction here. So only one library, the Microsoft Identity Web. In startup, we have, again, 2 lines of code to add the identity, which is brilliant, right? So this time, instead of saying Microsoft Identity Web App, we say Web API. That's the only difference you have to make to change from a web app to an API. And then down here, you need to use the user authentication. So 3 lines of code instead of 4, because we don't have the UI component or element here. Now, we've added a lot of functionality in this. So we hide all the complexity, and so I will show you in a bit what the complexity looks like, but we are hiding a lot of complexity here. This doesn't mean that you can't still go and do custom events on your token creation. You can do custom configuration, but one of the things that we added here that is not complex, it's using this API to call other APIs. So for example, you could be using this API as a middleware or as a proxy to multiple services. So the incoming call comes from the UI, it comes to your API, the API validates the incoming request, but it also has to do things like go and call your SQL database, or go and call your graph endpoints, or go and call SharePoint or whatever. That meant that you have to grab the token and then craft a new request and pass that token in, and then hopefully you got everything right. To simplify the process, we've added some super nice functionality here. So if I say dot enable token acquisition for calling downstream APIs, this is the magic here. So what this one will do is we'll instruct the middleware to not only validate the incoming tokens, but go and grab any other tokens that you need, so you can speak to your APIs, your backends, and whatever you need. So let's say yes. Now we want to cache it. We don't want to always have to go back to Azure AD and validate the fact that, hey, we've authenticated once and we have a token for calling a graph. You don't have to validate that every single time. So that's fantastic. And there are various options for working with token caches. You can have a memory token cache, you can have a session token cache, and you can have distributed token caches. You can also create your own customized ones. So for distributed token cache, as long as it implements the iDistributed cache interface, anything works. So you can have your own custom solution. But the beauty is that it is provided to you out of the box, so no extra lines of code to add, which is awesome if you ask me. And the last thing I wanted to call out is the add downstream web API. This might not mean much to you, but imagine that you have an API that calls into, this API code calls into another API, or you have to call into a weather API or whatever else. Then in that instance, by adding it here, it means that you can easily inject it into all your other controllers, that downstream API, and then it will have the appropriate authentication headers or authorization headers to go and speak to the right services. And it makes it super consistent and end-to-end. So it's a very nice experience. The last thing I want to show you here, so token cache, is right. Okay, we made it through the middleware. Now let's go into our controller and see what happens. Now our controller expects, our controllers, not the objects. Our controller expects an authorized call to come in. So you can see the authorized header up here, right? So the authorized attribute. So this controller needs to have an authenticated call coming in. But once you come in here, you also usually have to check that the user has the right permissions. In the past, if you had to do that, or if you ever implemented that, it meant that you had to grab the token, go through the claims, find the right claims, and then or scopes, and then decide what you want to do with the incoming call, whether you want to allow them or whether you want to deny them access. And that was about 15 or 20 lines of code they had to implement. Right here, we've reduced that to a single line of code. So you'll notice on line 35, we have HTTP context verify user has any accepted scope. This is awesome because all you have to do is just pass the scopes, which in this instance, I think are up here, access as user. So as long as your incoming call has the right scope, then this will either allow you to continue with the code execution or will send a 403 back saying missing the right claims, the right permissions, or an authorized call. So very few lines of code to implement security end-to-end. And this works exactly in the same way in Azure AD and P2C. You might wonder why I had to use different templates when it came to spinning up. Right now, it's not part of Visual Studio. We are working very, very hard to make the file new project inside Visual Studio part of the experience. But if you want to use it today, you have to use the custom template. So there's a template that you need to install. So we have templates for both web apps and APIs. And anything that runs on ASP.NET Core 3.1 or later can benefit from this one. So the templates are here, .NET New, you install these custom templates, and then you can do MVCs, you can do web apps, you can do Blazor and Blazor WASM as well. You can do gRPC and what have you. So anything that is running on top of ASP.NET Core can benefit from this library, which is fantastic. and it's coming to Visual Studio. So you could be able to either retrospectively say add authentication to my project and use identity.web. But for now, I would urge you to use the templates so you don't have to roll all that code yourself. It's not a lot of code, but you need to remember exactly and where to put things so that they work. Let's jump quickly back in the slides if there's no more questions. For our platform, we do say come as you are. And in fact, if you've ever been on our stream, you'll notice that we do a lot of crazy things that are not just first party. So the next slide may become as a shock to some of you, especially if you're part of the Microsoft ecosystem. You'll see that there's nothing Microsoft here. But what we are saying is that the Microsoft Identity Platform permeates all different technologies, all different platforms, all different languages. So you could be working with IntelliJ against AWS, writing Python, and you can still benefit from the Azure AD and the Microsoft Identity Platform. You could be creating solutions with Notepad and JavaScript running on Kubernetes on your on-prem environment, and you will still be able to benefit from the Microsoft Identity Platform. And that's why we want to ensure that you have an authentication solution, an identity solution that runs with your app and scales with your app. Now, if you are part of Microsoft and the Microsoft ecosystem, then I did say that the whole experience is a lot more improved because you get things like managed identity. So if you're running an Azure service, it means that you don't have to pass credentials to your other services. So you can say, my web app needs to call Key Vault. Perfect. I don't need to provide my access keys to my Key Vault. My web app on Azure will be able to communicate with Key Vault using a service principal behind the scenes. That's called managed identity, and will allow me to securely speak to my services without having to pass credentials. And that's a major component. Eliminating credentials from your code is probably one of the biggest things that can save your company from disaster, because have been many companies that have checked code into GitHub or other repos with I've seen customers that had production passwords and production API keys inside their configuration files because developers had to develop the app, and we want to eliminate that scenario. So managed identity allows you to do that. The Microsoft Identity Platform allows you to secure things end-to-end. So whether you're creating things with Power Automate or whether you're creating custom solutions with code and running on Azure or the Microsoft 365 platform, and everything can be secured end-to-end with the same identity platform. When you build with the Microsoft Identity, obviously we want to simplify signing. So you saw how easy it was to implement the solution. And if my browser had that profile for my custom domain configured, then I would also get single sign-on out of the box for free. So I didn't have to do anything. Safeguarding access. We want to ensure that the users are provisioned and managed correctly. So if somebody leaves your company, then you don't have to worry about that. We're also working on this thing called continuous assessment, if I remember correct, which looks at your tokens, and it will allow IT teams to invalidate tokens a lot sooner than the expiry time. So if your app, so in the app that we saw earlier on, I already authenticated, I have 1 hour's worth of access tokens there, or ID tokens. So that for that hour, even if I leave the company, I will still be able to log in, or I will still have access to the app. Now, with continuous access that are coming in, or continuous evaluation, I think it's called, the IT team can say, right, this person has left the company, let's cancel all the tokens. And that means that if I try to sign in within that hour, that token will be dead for me, and that safeguards the company from access and stuff. You can definitely build new experiences with Graph, and I will jump into Graph in a very short time. And you can help grow adoption, or you can help bring confidence to your users, especially if you're a vendor that's that creates apps for other people, like SaaS solutions. So if you say I'm Salesforce, then we can verify that you are who you say you are. And if people are downloading apps from the Microsoft Azure Marketplace, they're confident that they're downloading the Salesforce app from the right publisher, not some random person that to hijack the name. I did speak about single sign-on. So as long as your devices, as long as your devices and your browsers have the right things configured, tuned into the organization, then you get single sign-on for free out of the box. You don't have to configure anything. Most of the apps I access within Microsoft are all single sign-on. I don't have to ever pass my password unless I need to elevate permissions. So if I'm looking at my HR website with all my personal information, then I'm prompted, because at that point I need to elevate permissions and make sure that nobody has hijacked my device trying to access that. But for everything else, single sign-on works out of the box, whether I'm on mobile or my browser or my desktop apps. And that's a great experience for your end users. And we talked about MSAL, we talked about OpenID Connect, so I'll skip through that very quickly. I've already showed you how the Microsoft Identity.web is working. So if Marsha can do it, then Bob can do it too. And if I can do it, then you can do it too, trust me. The Microsoft Identity.web is built on top of MSAL, which is great. You only have one library to worry about. It's supported with ASP.NET Core 3.1 and later. One of the questions I get is, does it work with my .NET 4.5 or does it work with my ASP.NET Core 2.0? Unfortunately, there the news is that it's not. So I'm afraid they have to use 3.1 or later to benefit. But all the other apps can still work against Azure. It doesn't mean that the older apps do not work with it. You just have to write a little bit more code. MSAL is available on multiple languages, not just .NET. So you get .NET, Java, JavaScript, Python, and what have you. But you can also bring your own OpenID Connect or OAuth2 libraries. So if you're a Node and you're using Passport, then that's a perfectly valid solution. That's not a Microsoft library, but it does the job. And if you're already more comfortable with Passport, you can use that one. So bring your own libraries, we don't mind. Whatever makes you comfortable. Here I'm comparing the old and the new ways of doing things. I will pass the slides. I don't want to spend too much time on this. I've already shown you how much better it is with a new system. For some people that may have questions about how Microsoft Identity.web is hiding or encapsulating all the complexity and what happens to the things that you used to do before, I will tell you that these things are still there. So if you really need to mess with bearer authentication, if you need to manage the account controller and have custom views and what have you, then you can still do all these things. The nice thing about Microsoft Identity.web is that it wraps around all these things, so you don't have to do them. But if you need to pick specific things to work with, then all these different libraries, all these different components are still available to you. We'll just wrap around them. So the development experience, we saw how easy it is now to use the Identity.web. I've already shown you that demo. Let's go and delete some old code. I love that one. So in this instance, we're going to take an existing web app. And let me open this old code that does a little bit of the same stuff that we saw earlier on, but in the old way. So if you look into this project here, we start at line 32, and we go all the way down to line 127. I could eliminate all that code. Too far here. So 95 lines of code with services add Microsoft, so add authentication. Obviously, this is not going to work because I don't have the library here. But if I had Microsoft Identity.web, then it would be something like this, and then add Microsoft identity type web API, and I would pass my configuration. And I would eliminate an insane amount of code. That is the OpenID Connect. So 95 lines of code wiped out and replaced by 1 or 2 lines of code there. So you can see how big a difference it makes in the modern ASP.NET Core to work with identity. It makes your life so much easier. A couple more slides. I want to jump quickly to Graph Explorer. That's the next thing I want to talk about, and then we can wrap it up. So, So for those of you that haven't used Graph, it allows you to tap into organizational data, SharePoint, OneDrive, emails, accounts, everything that your organization has to offer, Dynamics, everything that is available in the Microsoft platform is now available to you via the Graph API, either for automating or for surfacing that data inside your solutions. So if you wanted your users, for example, to have access to the calendar information inside your app, you wouldn't have to go and you can pull that information inside your app rather than them having to go into their Outlook or some other solution to look at their calendar. So it creates this kind of a tight integration and this experience that users have only one place to go to see their information. We have customers that have created very elaborate dashboards. We have customers that create complex solutions that benefit from Graph and Azure. So the Graph API is what makes this happen. And you can have portals, timelines, search through documents. So it doesn't have to be just data that you surface. It can be anything hidden behind the scenes, and it can be used anywhere. Web apps, bots, even on HoloLens and holographic solutions, daemon apps, automation tools, and what have you. And then all the data behind the Microsoft 365 is exposed via the Microsoft Graph. And you can extend it as well with connectors. So let's have a very quick demo of what the Graph can offer to you. And from there, you can use either SDKs or you can do your own HTTP calls to work with the Graph data. So aka.ms, GE. Apparently, I've used that URL before here, only a few times. If you haven't logged in before, it might use some random data. It might use the unauthenticated user or some dummy data to play with. But you can also log in with your own account so you can see what information you can pull out. So you can see I can pull my profile information. This is definitely not an account I use for day-to-day. But let's say if I wanted to pull the people I work with, where is it? People. I think it's under people. I can say, hey, who are the people I usually work with or interact with in my solution? So, for example, if you are using Outlook, then you'll notice that you get smart completion when it comes to editing who you want to send the emails to. And this does a quick call into the people and says, hey, who does Christos usually work with? Oh, he works with JP. Perfect. Let's bring him up at the top because that's most likely the person he's emailing to. So this is how my Outlook experience gets enriched by using Graph, and there are all these different examples. There are two flavors of the API. There's the v1.0. This is the standard version, the GA version, and we have the beta version as well. Which we use to test new features. So if I were to come into my profile, you'll notice before I only had, I have a few components here, but if I change to my beta and run again, you'll see that I get a lot more information now. So if you, you'll see that some of this information actually mix into the GA version, the v1.0, once we feel like it. So the beta will always be beta because we're testing new things, and the V1 version gets enriched by new features coming in. There you go. Thomas is asking a question about authorization. How do you manage roles and permissions in Azure and in a custom UI? So for authorization, we support role-based authorization. So in the Azure portal, do I have it open? I do have it open. You will notice that we have roles and administrators. This is where you can add roles to your app. And when you are inside .NET, then you can say authorized based on a specific role. So if I open no, that's not the right one. Yeah, we're here. So if I go into my pages here and there, you can say in here, you can do role-based authorization. see, let's fix this dependency. And in here you can pass a role or policy. So this is totally built-in. You don't have to worry about that. So once you define the roles inside your solution, inside your app registration, then these roles will propagate via the identity ID token inside your object, your user object, and then from there you can validate the authorization. So it's built into the framework. You don't have to do anything customized. You can also use policies, as you can see, and then you can also do authorization based on claims. So if you have specific claims that come into the token in the user object, you can also use that information to allow access or not allow access. There's also groups. You can use, instead of roles, you can also use Azure AD groups. And that information allows you to, instead of rolling your own roles, you can use the existing group hierarchy within your tenant and say, well, if this user is an admin in the admin group, or if this user is in the sales group, then they can see specific parts of the information. A little bit more involved because the groups, you get the group ID and then you have to do a graph call to get the group name. But it is the way to implement things as well. So we definitely support authorization, and especially for .NET, it's super easy to implement. So yeah, going back to the Graph Explorer, you can use this one to find information. You might say, well, I don't see how that could be useful to me. If you saw Build, Scott Hassman did a demo where he changed the lighting in the house or his room based on his team status. So if he was busy on a call, the light was red. That meant that nobody can come into the room because he's busy. And if he was free, it will turn to green. So the lights were wired up via, I think, Azure Functions to respond to his status inside his, and I think we exposed that via, I can't remember where it is. I think it's, could be under Microsoft Teams. No, that's messages. There is definitely somewhere in the, I can't remember where it was. Extensions, maybe? No, that's for creating extensions. Anyway, there's an API. We don't have all the APIs here, by the way. If you want to see all the available APIs, then you can go into the documentation and find. And we have SDKs for Graph Explorer as well. So in the very similar way that we have MSAL, we also have libraries for the graph. So you can use it in Node, Java, Python, PHP, Ruby, whatever you want. And then if we don't have a library, we have a very good API, a very easy API to work with. So there you have it. That was Graph as well. And last one, I'm going to just talk a little bit about why you might want to use B2C. Obviously, we said if you have external users, you want to use B2C because that's where they can come in without having to be part of your organization, obviously. And you also get things like customization. Like this app doesn't look like B2C. It looks like my app, if my app was Woodgrove. The whole point there is to provide this kind of a consistent look and feel in your app. So when the users come, even though they get redirected to my Azure AD B2C to authenticate, then the look and feel of that page looks like your app. So they don't feel like they jump out and they come back in again. That page can look exactly as your web app or your mobile app. And in the very same essence that we have Azure AD that can scale with your app, a B2C can also scale with your app. Your first 50,000 daily users are free. So that means that until you hit that point, you don't have to pay anything for B2C. And then once you pass the threshold, you pay a few pennies every so many thousand. So B2C is something that you can leverage today if you're building apps for that don't rely on Azure AD or shouldn't rely on Azure AD. And you can also bring external identities. You can build elaborate solutions like a web app, a single page app that calls into an API, that calls into something else. So it's not just for simple solutions. So we have customers that do some very complex stuff. And with that, I'm going to go back into me and what we do in our job, and hopefully you enjoyed the session today. You learned that ASP.NET Core works very, very well with the Identity Platform. If you're a .NET developer, We have a lot of things in the framework built to work with Azure AD and the Microsoft Identity Platform. So if you want to see more of this, if you want to hear more of us talking about the platform and building exciting things with it, right now we're building an Azure automation tool that I can use to tag and delete resources on Azure. So if I forget and I spin up a demo and I forget about it, like today, then it will go and wipe out everything for me. And I can do that with Alexa. So I can say, Alexa, go and delete my resource group, and we'll do it for us. And we'll show how we do this live. So if you want to join us and build something fun, let us know. We're on the 4 to 5 show on Twitch every Monday and Friday. And I will put the email on the chat as well. So if you have questions, technical questions, service.microsoft. If you have any technical questions or anything that I said today and you want some more information, then feel free to reach out to me and my team, and we'll be more than happy to help you. That's me. Awkward silence.
They are too focused to the slides. And hi, Christos.
Hey.
Hey. Oops. Do you just type in your email address in the chat?
I did, yes.
But it seems like it doesn't appear on live.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And there's a new question from Thomas.
Yeah, what does MS Identity look like as an option alone with Facebook, Google, GitHub? Well, the Microsoft Identity Platform, if you're using B2C, allows you to wrap around the Facebook, Google, and GitHub. So, oh, you mean how it looks alone? Yeah, there's a username and password. So if you implement that, let me see if I can quickly jump into that. I don't think I have B2C here. Let me quickly. I might have to sign in with my. So this is on my Microsoft domain where I have my B2C. Yeah, it is a social auth option. In fact, we can use one of the pages to see how it would look like. Let me very quickly jump into my B2C there. And then from here, once it opens, we can run one of the workflows, the signing workflow, and see what that looks like. It's very nice to be able to test it without having an app. So if we go into user flows, it's already configured. Let's go simple, I think is the one. I have configure identity providers. Yeah, I have the identity providers. So if I run the user flow, which one? Let's go with this one. Is that going to work? It might not be. There you go. So this is what it looks like. This is the vanilla, the out-of-the-box experience. So it's not customized. It doesn't have anything else. It still looks very nice. So you can see up here we have email and password. You can disable that if you want to. So if you only want people to sign in with their social accounts, they come here. And then everything that you configure or everything you define will be down here. So you can have multiple. You can have Google, GitHub, Twitter. I mistyped Twitter here. You can have Facebook, all the different OpenID Connect providers. In fact, you have your own custom ones. We had somebody from somebody did a stream where they integrated Twitch as an identity provider to B2C. So B2C wraps all these in one nice page, and then the user can decide how they sign in, and then they get redirected back to the app. So hopefully this answers the question. Again, I didn't have to configure anything other than enabling them inside my identity providers. So you define the identity providers once, by the way. So I went into Google and said, I created an app inside Google that said it needs to speak to B2C. So when people authenticate against Google, they get redirected back to B2C, and then B2C is responsible for sending back the user to my app. So all this dance, all this handshake is happening behind the scenes. I don't have to do anything. And this Google identity provider was defined once. So I can have multiple apps using the same Google provider as an identity provider. So hopefully this answers the question. And I will make sure I share the slides with you guys. I'll put them. I'll send them to Chun, and then I don't know how you distribute them. You can make them part of the description in the YouTube portal or on the YouTube video, or you can put them on Meetup. I don't know what your standard process is, but I'll be more than happy to share the slides. And you can reach out to me on Twitter as well. I'm very active on Twitter, and you can always ask me questions there. So I will put it on the chat as well. Me or my friend Azure and CEO. That's John Patrick's email. Sorry, John Patrick's Twitter account. We're both super active, so if you have any identity questions, we're super excited to help you out.
Hi, Christos. Thank you so much. I just realized I talked to myself because I'm mute. Okay.
It's fine. Happens to the best of us.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you so much for the talk and explaining answering the questions.
Yep.
So is there any other questions? Calling once, twice, and other than sending me the slides, maybe you can upload to the slide share as well, so we can share the links later.
SlideShare is going away, isn't it? I got an email the other day that they're killing the site. Yeah.
I thought it's part of LinkedIn now.
It was part of LinkedIn, but I think it got acquired by somebody else. Yeah, apparently. Yeah, let me just put it up there. So if you go into SlideShare, and I don't think it's going to be a free service anymore.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I know. People have, because I asked this on Twitter. So Script will be operating the SlideShare business on December 1st.
Sad news. And
yeah, I know. And I don't think you'll be able to upload new slides.
Okay.
I'll use GitHub if you want to, so people don't have to. But I can make a link available to you so people can go and download it from directly from OneDrive, where we have a public folder.
Oh, sure. Thank you so much.
No problem. And thank you for having me.
Yep. Thanks for waking up so early to suit our time zone.
Oh no, it's fine. I like to start my day early, so don't worry about it. I'm usually up at 6, so getting up 30 minutes sooner is not a big of a problem.
Actually, I have one thing to share if you don't mind. Because
absolutely, go ahead.
Just now, let me share my screen. I read. Let me share my screen. Does it work? Yes. So just now, there's a question from the audience, at least I think. Mm-hmm. So I think I encountered similar problem as her. So it turns out that what you say is right. So if by default this account in this organization directory is chosen, so that's why when she going to create an application, the personal account cannot be used.
Yep.
So she needs to either choose this or this. Then it will be something I just created, so it will be something like this. So the message won't be shown over there. And I just realized another thing is there's V1 and V2 and Golang supporting the version 2 of the OAuth now. That's cool thing.
All right, nice.
But we can still use V1, right? Because there's no ETL for decommission.
Yes, there isn't. But if you are using V1, you don't get all the nice benefits that you have with the V2 endpoint. So we highly, highly recommend that you don't use V1 anymore. And if you have the ability to change to V2, then you should. For example, if you're creating single page apps with MSL.js 2.0, you don't have to use implicit flow anymore, which means that you eliminate the need of passing a client secret inside your code, which can compromise the security of your solution. And we use PKC or Pixie with MSL.js 2.0 to authenticate against the V2 endpoint. So if you are in that, and in fact, there's no code changes for your single page app. So your Angular code, your JavaScript code does not need to change other than consume the new package and automatically point to the V2 endpoint.
Ah, I see.
Yes.
Okay.
So also that's a year-old blog post. So highly out of date.
Yes.
So please start using the V2 endpoints when you can and start decommissioning ADA at any point.
Okay, can understand. Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, so let's go back. So thanks again, Christos, for the excellent sharing. Learned quite a lot today. Guess I will go and try it out and let you know soon if I encounter any problem.
Yes, please do. Especially the new library is fantastic. So try it out and let us know if you have any problems or any issues, any blockers.
Sure. And yeah, there's an announcement is that next month, actually 2 weeks later, we are going to have a .NET Conf of this year. So they are going to introducing .NET 5. And Christos is one of the speakers. And we have some speakers from Singapore as well. So please join us. This year, we won't have any local .NET conference. Instead, we will have one just at the .NETconf.net. So please join them and hope to see you there. And that's all. Thank you. Thanks all of you for joining. And hope to see you all again in December because November is .NET Conf. So see you all in December. And please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you, Christos, once again.
Thank you.
Have a nice day, everyone.
You too. Have a nice weekend. Bye. Happy Halloween, everyone.
Halloween. Bye-bye.